Good morning. My name is Jadwiga Horaska. I am here together with Ola Bębnista and Piotr Mamiński, and we are today to discuss with you your Polish personal income tax duties, obligations that are falling to you regarding and resulting from the Polish personal income tax law, and the very important deadline of 30th of April this year, where you potentially will need to file your Polish personal income tax return with the Polish tax authorities. And a couple of administrative points that are important. This training is designed to help you to be able to personally and individually file your Polish annual tax return with the Polish tax authorities, to understand a bit a Polish personal income tax system. Obviously, we do not have kind of an ambition to make you tax consultant, but what we have as a plan for today to show you how your Polish tax form shall be completed. And apart from that, what is important, we've got here Piotr Mamiński. He is on the chat facility, and during this today training, for the whole time of this training, you will be in a position to add any question that you seem as a relevant, important for you, and we do our best to help you in terms of its reconciliation. So let's start. Firstly, how the agenda would look like. We'll start with the basics, where you will learn a bit about the Polish personal income tax matters. Then I will tell you how the Polish tax residency rules are established. Then we will go through technical session where on the step-by-step basis you will learn how to complete your Polish personal income tax return. And in the next part you will learn about the pre-filled tax form that is available on the website of the Polish Ministry of Finance, and the tax support which you may find and you may require from the Polish tax authorities. And finally, we'll also go through some of the questions that you will raise on the chat. And at the very last session, if we'll still be in a position to discuss, and you will have a chance and you will be able to learn a bit more about details of the Polish tax system, tax reliefs available for you in Poland. And this is our plan for today. And let's start with the first session, with the first point. These are these basics. And this is the discussion about the, if you could, about the Polish personal income tax rates. Important remark, Polish tax rates are generally progressive, and you can see on the slide here that if you earn the income that is not exceeding 85,000 of Polish zloty, the tax rate applicable to you amounts to 18%, 1/8. In the case when your income, cumulated yearly income exceeds 85,000 of Polish zlotys, which is around 20,000 euros, the tax rate in Poland applicable to the income exceeding this 85,000 of Polish zlotys is 32. Important. In certain cases, there is also a chance to use tax deductible, tax decreasing amount, which is used in the case of the lower income or the income not exceeding 127,000 of Polish zlotys, where you may see on the slides how this tax amount decreasing is calculated. Here you may see that if the income is truly low and that does not exceed 6,600 Polish zloty, then you are in a position to have a tax decreasing amount of 1,188. In the case when your cumulative annual income exceeds 127,000 of Polish zlotys, you are in a position to say that your amount decreasing tax is equal to null. This is how the amount decreasing the tax is calculated. And from this part, you need to remember that tax rates in Poland are progressive. First part of the income not exceeding 20,000 subject to 18%. Amount increasing 20,000 of euro approximately will be subject to 32% tax rate in Poland. In certain cases, you are allowed to use tax decreasing amount. if your income is meeting the respective thresholds. On the slides you are finding the respective details. In terms of the tax system in Poland, the way how the income is determined for the personal income tax purposes is quite ordinary. We take into account overall income of the given person, and this is the amount that is subject to personal income tax reconciliation, and how the taxable basis is calculated. It is calculated as the revenues decreased by the cost of earning revenue, which in certain cases can be specified either as a lump sum amount or as a certain percentage. This is how the income is determined. And what is also important, if the revenues are not exceeding the costs and actually are lower than the cost of earning, in certain cases it is possible, then you are incurring a loss, which under the Polish tax law can be utilized for the purpose of future reconciliations. The law currently provides that you've got 5 years to be in a position to utilize the tax laws in Poland, and in each particular year you cannot utilize more than 50% of the incurred loss. On this slide you are also finding kind of a useful link which is to the Polish Ministry of Finance link, and you may find on this link an information prepared by the Polish government on the basics of the Polish personal income tax, and learn more details if for some reasons it is required or you wish them for the purposes of your reconciliation. I should have said it at the very beginning, so if I could stop for a while, this is again some administrative point. The slides that you are seeing will be distributed to you after the presentation, along with certain useful tools that we have prepared for you. And after this training today, they will be distributed to you via PwC system, under which you have been receiving links to this today training. This should happen still today or tomorrow in the first part of the day. Again, on the track of the personal taxes, sorry for this administrative remark, how do you pay taxes in Poland? First important thing, if you are working in Poland and receiving salary for your duties performed in Poland under a Polish employment contract, then your taxes on a monthly basis are operated by your Polish company, in our case city entity in Poland. On the monthly basis, city entity in Poland is withholding monthly tax advances and paying them, remitting them to the Polish tax authorities. On the monthly basis, you do not have any obligation towards Polish tax system, apart from the very fact that you simply need to earn your money, and all the remittance, withholding, reporting obligation is falling on your employer. And the situation is different when it comes to the annual tax reconciliation, because the tax advances is kind of a prepayment installment which are distributed, remitted to the Polish tax authorities. At the end of the year, you need to do kind of a reconciliation, balancing of your total annual tax liability with the tax advances paid, withheld from your salary during the tax year. And then, if the balance is positive, in that sense that your tax liability amounts to 1,000 zloty, while the tax advances withheld from your salary were amounting to 900 zloty, then this positive balance of 1,000 zloty needs to be extra paid to the Polish tax authorities. On the other hand, if the balance is negative, and your tax liability again amounts to 1,000 zloty, but your tax advances withheld by your employer during the year amount to 1,200 Polish zloty, then you are lucky, you may expect a tax refund from the Polish tax authorities. This is how the taxes are paid in Poland. And now, again, one important introductory remark and the basic information regarding the way how the residency status is determined for the Polish tax purposes. The first important information on the conditions. If you are to spend in Poland more than 183 days, or you have in Poland center of personal or economic interests, then under the Polish provisions of tax law, you are treated as a person having a place of residency for tax purposes in Poland. This means that you are subject to so-called unlimited tax liability towards Polish taxation. Unlimited tax liability for the Polish taxation means that Polish tax authorities have a right to tax you on your worldwide income. So the income earned by you both on the territory of Poland, but also the income that you may earn somewhere in the world. So for example, if while staying and working in Poland, you've got the income from city entity connected with your employment, but apart from that, you are also earning kind of a dividend from a Dutch company, if you are treated as a unlimited tax liability payer in Poland, you will need to declare in tax in Poland these both sources of income. Employment income coming from city, plus also this dividend income given as an example here, because you are unlimited tax liability payer. On the opposite of that, we've got this limited tax liability towards Polish taxation, where you need to pay the taxes in Poland, but solely in respect of these sources of your income that are related to your duties performed in Poland and income coming from Polish sources. So, being back to our example with the Polish employment contract income and dividends from the Netherlands, if you are limited tax liability payer, Poland will have a right to tax you solely on this Polish employment contract income, and dividend income will be outside the scope of the Polish taxation. So this was important. This was these residential rules. They are important because before you will start thinking about your reconciliation, about the form you need to complete, first you need to find out whether you are a person that spends in Poland more than 183 days or is having in Poland center of vital interest, and then if the answer is yes, then I tax in Poland my worldwide income. If the answer is no, I spend in Poland 60 days, I do not have a center of vital interests in Poland because my family is still living somewhere in the Netherlands, in the Ukraine, I am potentially limited tax liability payer, and then my obligation to pay the taxes is limited. And this was this basics and this first part that is important. Right now we are at the clue and we will start on the annual tax reconciliation. Thank you.
So now we are going to go through the more technical part of our presentation, and we are going to tell you how step by step you should prepare your annual tax return. So the first information which is important from your point of view is that in Poland tax year is equal to calendar year. So you should declare all your income which was received during the calendar year from the given employer. After the tax year ends, up to end of February, your Polish employer should provide you with PIT-11 form, which is in fact the summary of your wages, the wages statement, which you derived, which were paid by your employer during the year. This information, according to the information which we have, were provided by Citi to you via special platform, and you are entitled to download this for your computers. So if you have only employment income in Poland, this information, PIT-11, is crucial for preparation your annual tax return. This information is issued by your employer only once in a whole year, and it contains summary of your income which was paid to you by your employer, summary of tax deductible costs, social security contributions, health insurance contributions, and tax advances which was withheld and paid during the year by the employer on your behalf. When you will receive PIT 11, you have the basis for preparation of your annual tax return, but you should always remember that the obligation of reconcile your income toward tax office is always your individual obligation. So you are always obliged personally to submit your annual tax return. The deadline for submit annual tax return is last day of April of the next tax year. So for 2017, you are obliged to submit your annual tax return at the end of April at the latest. In case if from your annual tax reconciliation results underpayment, so you are obliged to pay the tax, you should also do so before the statutory deadline. So on the last day of April, the amount of your annual tax which is to be paid to the tax office should be already booked on the tax office bank account. In general, in Poland, persons who are obliged to submit the tax returns are individuals who are considered as Polish tax residents. So these people always are obliged to make annual reconciliation in Poland, and also other individuals, not only tax residents, who received the income from Polish sources during the tax year. What is very important remark here and should be underlined very clear is when you are employed under Polish employment contract, you will be always obliged to submit your annual declaration. So in case if you are employed in City Poland, then you are obliged to prepare your annual tax return.
Right now about joint reconciliation. The Polish tax law provides for a certain possibility for the Polish taxpayers to file tax form together with a spouse or with a child. You may see here on the slide the information, what are the conditions. There is a number of them that needs to be fulfilled in order to be in a position to file jointly. Again, this is not an obligation, this is a right which may be effectively used and will bring you some tax benefit in the case when you've got a spouse that does not earn the income or the income earned by the spouse is not significant. As you may see here, the conditions are mainly connected with a fact that you need to be married for the whole year, and that under the Polish law you need to be formally married, so no partners relation will work here, and also you need to have a joint co-ownership with your spouse. Plus finally there is a necessity that in the case when your spouse is conducting business activity, this business activity income is not subject to preferential 19% tax rate. The benefit from joint married reconciliation is mainly based on the fact that when we do the joint married reconciliation, the income earned by the spouses is added, then for the purpose of determination of tax liability is split into two, divided into two. The tax is calculated on this half of this amount and then multiplied by 2. Thanks to that, there is a kind of effect that if the income of one spouse is exceeding first tax bracket, we have been discussing it at the beginning of 85,000, and you just split the amount, then the income is subject to lower tax rate almost 2 times. And the benefit of joint marriage reconciliation in Poland, in the case when spouse has no income, can be equal to 12,000 of Polish zlotys, so approximately 3,000 euro. And you may see here these conditions. It's important if you are meeting these conditions and your spouse is not earning income or is earning some insignificant amounts while your income is exceeding the first tax bracket, it's worth to consider joint married filing. The same, you may also decide if you are a alone parent of a child and you are bringing it alone, you are also allowed to file a tax return together with your child. The benefit in terms of taxes is just the same. The way of reconciliation is based on the same rules. This is on the joint merit reconciliation.
Now we are going to discuss about the steps which you have to undertake in order to make your annual tax reconciliation. First, you have to collect the documents. So this is the referration to my previous remarks regarding PIT 11. At the end of February 2018, at the latest, you received PIT 11 form from your employer, and this document is mainly basis of preparation your annual tax return in case if you have income from employment. In PIT 11 form, you can find the summary of your income which you received during the year, tax deductible costs, social security contributions, health insurance contributions, and the tax advances which were withheld by your employer during the year. When you have this document already, you should think about the incomes which you received during the tax year and make a choice of proper tax form. The most common tax form related to employment income is PIT 37. In some cases, PIT 36 it's when you have some other income. In the slide you can find the names of other tax forms. Some of them will be discussed on today's presentation, but we will focus mainly on PIT 37 form, which will be discussed in more detailed way. What you should bear in mind always when you are preparing your annual tax return, when you start this process, is to make sure that you choose proper tax return form. Now I'm going to tell you a few words about how you should fill out the form. There are a few manners which you can choose. First, you can download official government program e-Deklaracje. This is the program which is provided by Ministry of Finance. You need to have internet access in order to upload it. And here in presentation, which will be provided to you later, you can find the link under which you can find this program details to download. So this is the first option. Second option, you may try to benefit the support which is offered by the tax office. So in this respect, you can use a pre-filed tax return. This is initially updated tax return which is prepared by the tax office for you. And in order to download it, you should also follow the link which is provided in the presentation. What is important here in pre-filed tax returns is that this form of filling the forms or making the annual reconciliation is available only if you are if you received employment income during the year, which should be reconciled on PIT 37 form, or income from capital gains, which are reconciled on PIT 38 form. I will tell you more details about it in the next slides. So this is the second form of fill out the documents, and the last form, you can complete electronic forms which are available on Ministry of Finance website, and here in presentation there is also a link which you should use in order to download these documents on your computer. Next step is to submit your completed tax return in the tax office, and you can do it online using e-Deklaracje program, which enables sending the updated tax return to the tax office, or pre-filed tax return, so this is online. And also you can do it in more traditional way, so you can print your updated, completed tax return and sign it. It is very important, and provide to the tax office personally or via the post. In any case, you should assure that that your tax return will reach the tax office within a statutory deadline. Next step, when your tax return is already completed and you know the summary of your annual tax reconciliation, you should pay the tax which results from your annual tax return. Of course, in case if the difference between the tax calculated in the tax return and the tax advances withheld earlier by your employer results with the difference which creates the underpayment. This underpayment should be transferred to the tax office bank account and within statutory deadline. So at the latest on the last day of April, the money should reach the tax office bank account. Otherwise, you should be aware that the penalty interest may be calculated, and the amount of this interest currently is 8% for year. If the outcome of your annual tax return is overpayment, you are entitled to tax refund from the tax office. This is very good situation for you, and but you should be aware of some details which which are kind of facilitation. You should provide the tax office with your actual and valid bank account number, 26 digitals, including also SWIFT and IBAN labels. And this information you can pass to the tax office via special forms. So it can be ZAP3 form. This is the registration form which should be used when you were granted with PESEL identification number, and the other form of inform the tax office about your about your bank account number is NIP7 form, and this form should be used in case if you were granted with NIP number. So this is a personal tax number in Poland. So this is the main difference. You should submit one of these forms in the tax office. What is important is that if you already provided your bank account to the tax office, then you do not have to do it in next year, because the tax office is already informed about your bank account number, so it is not necessary to do it again. And what is also important, that if you would not pass the information about your bank account number, then the money will be transferred to you via the post, which probably will extend the process from the time point of view.
It is important, sorry for interrupting. It is important that if you are expecting a refund, you properly notify the tax office about your bank account number, because receiving money via the post is always subject to the charges which the tax office is imposing in the case of kind of a transfer made by the post. So if you do not want to receive less than expected and less that is due to you, it's better to ensure that the tax office has your bank account details.
And what is also important is that these forms in which you inform the tax office about your tax account number should be always submitted in paper form, because neither e-deklaracje program nor other, for example, pre-filed tax return option will not allow you to submit this registration form online. So this is the form which always should be submitted in traditional way. If the tax office is already provided with your with your bank account number and you are entitled to the tax refund, you should receive it within 3 months since your annual tax return was submitted, unless the tax audit was initial, but this is rather exception than the rule. Now we are going to go through the forms, which I hope will allows you to understand better the information which are required in your tax reconciliation. So at first we will discuss for a while about PIT 11 form. Just to remind you, this is the form which you received from your employer at the end of February. So PIT 11 form, it is provided to the tax office relevant to you. So this is the tax office which is allocated to the area in which you stay on the last day of previous tax year, or if you are not in Poland anymore, on the last day of your stay in Poland. So this tax office name will be provided to you in field 5 of PIT 11 form, and if you believe that your HR department identified the tax office properly, then you can just rewrite the name of the tax office in your annual tax return. If we go further, we will find field 11 when your tax number is indicated, and in field 18 to 27 your address data are provided. You should always check whether this is correct, because your employer should have actual address data, but this is not the rule. Next part, part A of PIT 11 form is the part which is crucial for you to preparation your annual tax return. So you can find your revenues, tax deductible costs, your tax advances which were paid during the year, and also if you received some foreign income which is exempt from taxation in Poland, it will be also put in PIT 11 form in field 32 of section A. If you are covered with the structure including transfer of the copyrights to your employer, then also this income which is subject to this structure will be indicated in separate field in PIT 11 form, and this income will be indicated in 34 field, and in next field you can find this decreased tax deductible costs which resulting from copyright transfer. So this is the basic information. If we go further, in field 70 we can find Social Security contributions summary which were paid by your employer during the year, and if there were any foreign Social Security contribution, it will be shown in field 71. Social Security contributions, as a rule, are income deductible in Poland, so you can decrease your taxable income with these amounts. The next position is health insurance contributions, which are indicated in field 72. If in case if you had foreign employment income exempt from Polish taxation in Poland, and there were social security, health insurance contributions on this income, then it will also be indicated in PIT 11 in 73 form. Field. What is important is that health insurance contributions can decrease your tax.
Right now, you can see something what you will receive after this training. This is a print screen of the simple Excel tool that we have prepared for the purpose of this training. This is the simple calculator showing the potential tax liability you will need to pay, you will need to receive back from the tax authorities, depending on the figures on your PIT 11 form. You may use this Excel tool to check to determine whether you have prepared your Polish tax return properly. Boxes on the right side, you've got kind of the description which boxes on the PIT 11 you should take into account. As we have discussed a moment ago, boxes with revenue, with cost of earning revenue, tax advances withheld from your salary, social security contributions, healthcare contributions. You just need to transpose the amounts from PIT 11 form to PIT 37 form to the boxes which were described as relevant. If everything goes smoothly and your program, your e-deklaracje, your calculators are working correctly, you've made the proper transposing, this calculator should be used as a check cell, and you may see here the outcome, either tax to be paid or the tax liability to be refunded by the tax authorities, depending on the outcome, either box 128 or the box 129 will need to be completed, as this will show the final amount of your tax liability that is due under your Polish annual tax return. Okay, we can go further.
Okay, so the next step is to preparing your tax return. So we are going to discuss about PIT 37 form. This is, as I mentioned it earlier, this is the most common form which is used by the taxpayers, because this is the summary, the reconciliation of the income from employment. This part, which you can see on your slide now, is in fact the amount which should be here should be in fact copy from PIT 11 form which you received from your employer. And this is, as Jadwiga just mentioned a while ago, that the proper amounts should be rewrite from PIT 11 form from the proper gaps to PIT 37 gaps. So this is very similar construction. So in field 37 we can find revenue, 38 are tax deductible costs, the tax advances are summarized in field 41, in field 42 are revenue from copyrights if you have any, and the costs from the copyrights are in 11 are in another form 33. So this amount should be rewrite from your PIT 11. If you choose a joint marriage tax reconciliation, then in this section C2 you should put the information similar as discussed before regarding your spouse income. So it will be also the income, tax deductible costs, and tax advances, maybe other items. Next part, this is D part, and in D part we have income deductions. The position which will be filled for both you and your spouse, if there is joint marriage reconciliation, it will be position related to social security contributions, and you should put it in field 91, I think, and 99 and 100. Then another step is calculation of your annual tax return, which should be done in part E of the tax form. And the taxable base is your income, which is decreased by tax deductible cost and social security contributions. So this income, which is indicated in PIT 11 and rewrite in PIT 37 appropriate field should be decreased by tax deductible cost and social security contributions. If you can also have other income deductions, and these deductions are very detailed way described in our supplement, so you can familiarize yourself with this. As an example, we can talk about the relief from rehabilitation purposes. So when we have the taxable base determined, we can calculate our tax, and the tax rate will depend on the amount of the income. As it was mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, if your income exceeds 85,500 złotych, Polish złotych, so about 20,000 euro, then you will be obliged to apply higher tax rate, 32%. If your income do not exceed, then lower tax rate is applicable. So here we have the tax, and in another part of PIT 37 form, in the part F, we have tax deductions, and the most important tax deductions is health insurance contributions for both you and your spouse if it is joint marriage reconciliation. And also very popular form of tax deduction is child relief, which is also described in our supplement. Then in the part G, we have calculation of your tax obligation in Poland. So we in this part, in field 126, we should put our tax due, and in the next field we should put the tax advances which were already paid by the employer during the year, and we should compare these amounts. If the tax advances were withheld in higher amount than the tax which result from our tax calculation, then we have overpayment, and we are entitled to the tax refund, and this should be reflected in field 129. In case if the tax resulting from the tax return is higher than the tax advances which were withheld during the year, then we have outstanding tax liability which should to be covered, and this liability will be reflected in field 128. So this is quite everything about PIT 37 form, and our reconciliation is almost done. But what is also important, and it is really crucial, is that you should sign your annual tax return before you submit it to the tax office. If you will not sign the tax return, it will not be effectively submitted in the tax return. So this is very, very important issue. The next tax form, which is also commonly used, maybe in it's not so popular as PIT 37, but it's also often used, is PIT 36, and this tax return relates to the different kind of income. For example, income from business activity, rental income, income from a foreign employment contract, so-called other sources, and other income which you might receive outside of Poland.
One important remark: I was reviewing the chart in the meantime, and there was a question on the dividends earned in the UK. This PIT 36 form will be relevant just in the case when, apart from the employment income, you may also earn the income coming from the UK that could be taxable in Poland in form of dividends or interests. So this form may be for the people who, apart from the employment, have got also some other sources of the income. On the next slide, We'll go through them pretty soon. You will see similar pattern as we have already discussed in terms of PIT 37 form. So, firstly, that the revenues, sources of your income. Here could be the employment income, but you may see here much more of the sources of the income, income coming from business activity, rental income, income from other sources earned by you during the given year, which you will need to include in your PIT 36 forms. The descriptions accompanying to these print screens can be helpful for you to understand where you are and what you need to complete. Again, the same story, social security contributions, deductible, they need to be included. The income deductions like donations made for charity purposes can be used here, but please remember that you will also need to include them in the respective attachments to the tax forms. You calculate the tax base on the PIT 36 form just in the same manner. You can decrease the tax due by the healthcare contributions paid by you, paid by the spouse in the case when joint marriage reconciliation is included. You calculate the tax due. You take into account the tax advances paid during the year, and then again we are home. We've got tax to be paid, or we've got the tax overpaid. Again, section U, this is important. This is the section where you need to sign. Signing is for you in the case of joint marriage reconciliation, also for the spouse. You may see here box number 346. Just on the right there is box number 347 where the spouse needs to sign in the case of joint marriage reconciliation. Now the form PIT 38.
The form PIT 38 is applicable when you receive some capital gains income in Poland. For example, if you sell the shares. And in such case, you should submit PIT 38 form. The deadline for submission this tax return is also similar as any other, so it should be done at the last day of April at the latest. So in this form, in the section C, you should provide the information about your income from capital gains. You should also include tax deductible costs if you have any. This form is quite short and is quite easy to handle. You can also include the losses from the previous years if you have any. You should, however, be aware that in 1 year you are not entitled to reconcile more than 50% of the loss which was carried in previous year, and the loss can be carried forward for the next 5 years. Then if you would take into consideration your income, your tax deductible costs, potentially losses, you will have a taxable base, and the tax is calculated according to the flat rate, which is equal to 19%. And this tax, due to the fact that from the capital gains there are no tax advances during the year, so in most cases, if your costs are not higher than your earnings, then you will be obliged to pay the tax from the capital gains declared on this tax form, and this tax should be also provided to the Polish tax office by the end of April.
We've got another form, PIT 39, that is used in the case when in the last year you decided to sell real estate property. Then you may be obliged to file such a PIT 39 form when you separately declare the income coming from real estate property sold by you in the previous year. Another important part of the job, it's PIT 28 form. You might have seen it before. In the case when you've got real estate property and you receive rental income, there is a chance to use in Poland kind of a lump sum taxation at 8.5% last year. And if you have applied for such 8.5% lump sum taxation, the rental income earned by you should have been reconciled under PIT 28 form. Important remark, I am saying should have been reconciled because lump sum taxation form should have been filed by the end of April. But this is the form that you may be familiar with in the case when you earn the rental income reconciled as at 8.5% last year. And the very last part, these are the attachments to the Polish tax forms. PITM, this is when you've got children and your children they are younger than 18, they are earning the income, then the income earned by such a child is added to the income of the parent and they are reconciled together. Another form, PITO, this is a PIT where you put various reliefs, where you put the reliefs for children, for donations, and you need to attach it to the tax form either PIT 37 or PIT 36 just to put the relevant info on the tax reliefs available for you. Finally, PIT ZG, this is the form that is used in the case when you are Polish tax resident, and while preparing your Polish tax form, you've got also the income that needs to be declared in Poland, but subject to taxation abroad. Then PIT-ZG will be the proper one. Right now, the helpful links, helpful information that should allow you to go easily through tax filings in Poland.
First of such facilitations which are available for you is pre-filed tax return, and this is in fact the tax return which is prepared by the tax office on your behalf. What is important to remark here is that pre-filed tax return may relate only to the income which you receive from employment and which should be reconciled on PIT 37 form, or to the capital gains which are reconciled on PIT 38 form. This pre-filled tax return is quite a friendly institution because after you download this pre-filed tax return, you can kind of edit it, and you can include reliefs and deductions which you would like to benefit. You can also provide the tax office with the data of a public benefit organization to which you would like to pass 1% of your annual tax. You can also include tax deductible, additional tax deductible cost if you have any, and provide information about your additional income. What is important when we are talking about pre-filed tax return is that this option is available only for the taxpayer personally. So there is no possibility that the proxy will submit pre-filed tax return on your behalf. It is worth to use pre-filed tax return because it is quite easy to handle and it preserves you to the errors like accounting errors, for example, because the information which are included in such initially updated form by the tax office are in fact just copied from the information, the wages statement PIT 11 or PIT 8C, which were provided to the tax office by your employer or by other entity who paid the remuneration to you if it is remuneration from the capital gains. So this may be helpful because this is quite user friendly, and this minimize the risk of different errors. When you should submit this pre-filed tax return, this option is available between 15th of March just to the end of the April. So the last day of April is the last day when you can use from this form. In order to download and to send the pre-filed tax returns, you need to authorize your data, and you can do it in 3 ways. First, you can use a so-called trusted profile, which is a kind of official profile confirmed by Ministry of Finance, and which is not very commonly used among the taxpayers in Poland. Second option is using qualified signature. If you were granted with such signature, this is also kind of official item which is granted to the taxpayer. And third option, which is the most popular, is to provide your authorization data, your credentials. So this is the name, your identification number, NIP or PESEL, your date of birth, and the sum of revenue which you received in Poland in previous tax year, so in 2016. In case if you did not receive any income in Poland in 2016, then you should write 0 amount, and the system will guide you further and ask additional information. So in the next slide, you can see a short description of downloading this pre-filed tax return. So you should follow the link which is provided in the presentation. This is the link to the Ministry of Finance website. There is a tax portal, and you should choose the option which is marked in red at the slide. And in the next step, you should choose the tax form which you would like to download, whether it will be PIT 37 or PIT 38. If you choose PIT 37, you should answer yes to the question of would you like to use pre-filed tax return PIT 37. The answer should be yes, and then you will be asked to provide the form of this pre-filed tax return. So you will have to choose whether you will reconcile individually, or it should be joint merit tax return. You can also choose option reconciliation with a single with a child. And in the next step, you should enter your credentials. If it is PIT 38, the procedure is quite similar. You also have to answer yes for the question and enter your credentials. But what is important and should be underlined, that in case if you provide incorrect credentials, authorization data for the 5 times, then the possibility of using a pre-filed tax return will be blocked, and you will not be able to use it anymore. In such case, you should choose another form of your annual tax reconciliation. So in such case, if this possibility will be blocked, you can, for example, use a Deklaracje program or PIT WZ, which I will tell you about in a while. When you enter your credentials and everything would go smoothly, then you will have access to the pre-filed tax return, which was prepared on your behalf by the tax office. So you will have on your screen the PIT 37 form or PIT 38 form, depending on your earlier choice. And now you should check whether this tax return was prepared correctly. You can edit the tax return and fill the deductions, the reliefs, like relief for children, or you can enter, for example, information of your donation, which will decrease your taxable income. Also, you can enter the details regarding public benefit organization to which you would like to pass 1% of your annual tax. And also you can add some other income which you received during the year and which from some reasons were not included in pre-filed tax return. So now your pre-filed tax return is almost completed. You should verify your tax return, so you should confirm that this is made correctly, in this case you should use your credential once more in order to verify, and then in the proper field you should provide your email address, and on this email address will be sent the confirmation of submission of the tax return. So it will be confirmed that you submit the tax return, and also you will be provided with kind of authorization code which will allows you to get the certificate of receiving the tax return. So this is the information which you should have on your email, on your archives, because without this information you will be not able to get the document which will officially confirm the submission of the tax return. In order to obtain such official receipt certificate, you should follow this instruction which is on the slide. So in this respect you should submit appropriate search or check status button on the declaration, and then you will be provided with the window in which your pre-filed tax return will be displayed. Then you should enter the email address which you provided at the beginning of the whole process, and also the authorization code, and this will allows you to find your tax declaration and submit it once again. Now you are excuse me. Now you are able to print your tax return on PDF format or XML format, and you can have it in your archives. Few words about the submission. When you submit the pre-filed tax returns, then you can have different communicates. So what is very important, and what we would like you to remember, is that the only correct status of submitting pre-filed tax return is status 200. This status allows you to save this tax return and collect the document which confirm that the tax return was submitted. So the only status which is correct is status 200. In this slide you have described all the possible statuses which you can see. In some cases it is enough to refresh the page, and in such case the correct status will be displayed at your screen.
Sorry for disturbing. This is important, this status confirming that the tax return was filed. This was also a question on the chat on that. It is worth to save somewhere this form. As you may know, in the case when you will decide on applying for kind of a credit in Poland, the bank may ask you, for example, for a confirmation that you have filed your Polish tax return in Poland. Sometimes also for immigration purposes you may be asked for that, and then this form confirming that you have filed a tax form may need to be presented. So this document is as worth and as important for you as the copy of the tax form itself.
So now a few words about another form of possible support from the tax office. It is another option which you can use. So you can submit the application for preparation the tax return by the tax office on your behalf. So the difference with the pre-filled tax return is that pre-filled tax return is already prepared and you have to just download it. And in case of PITWZ, because this is how the form name, you should submit the application to the tax office and the tax office will prepare it. What is important that this option is relevant only for the tax reconciliation which is connected from employment income and which should be declared on PIT 37 form. So this is very important. In case if you submit application for PITWZ form and the tax authorities will assess that the proper form should not be PIT 37 but other form, for example PIT 36, then you will receive the notification and you will not be entitled to use this form of support. And what is also important is that you will be provided with your annual tax return by the tax authorities, and your only action which you have to undertake is accept or reject this tax return. It is also worth to mention that this option is also available only for the taxpayers themselves. There's no possibility to submit such application via the proxy. Important deadlines. The application for preparation should this PITWZ form should be submitted before 1st January and 16 April of the following tax year. So in relation to the income which you received in 2017, you have some time left to submit such application to the tax office. And starting from 15 of March, the tax authorities have 5 working days since the application submission to prepare your annual tax return. So if you will, for example, submit your application on Monday, then on Friday you should have your annual tax return prepared by the tax office. And up to 30 April, the last day of April, you are obliged to accept or reject your annual tax return prepared by the tax office. In case if you will not undertake any actions, then your tax return will be considered as submitted in the tax office within statutory deadline. Here on the next slide you can find the short instruction including the link which should be used to submit the application to PITWZ declaration. And you should agree that the bottom and confirm that you submit a PITWZ application, and you should provide the details like your personal details, the tax office, the kind of tax return, so individual, joint married or with a child. You should also indicate the reliefs which you would like to benefit, and you should provide the email address on which your tax return will be provided. And on the next slide, you have more detailed instruction. This is about providing the details about child allowance, and one of this information is the amount of deduction per child. But you don't have to worry, because the system will guide you and suggest the amount automatically when you provide number of your children. What is also important in this form of tax office support is that you always should provide the information about tax deductible costs. If you would not do it, then tax deductible cost will not be included in your annual tax return, because it is not updated automatically. Even if such information was indicated on your PIT 11 form, it is for some reasons it will not be updated automatically on your tax return. What is also important in this form of tax office support, in this facility, is that you also should assure that you have official receipt certification, called UPO in Polish. As Jadwiga mentioned, it is very important document, and it should be stored in the within 5 years in general. The summary of possible actions when you using PIT-WZ form is what you can do. You can accept the tax return. In this respect, you should submit accept to button on the website. And in such case, your annual tax return will be considered as submitted within statutory deadline. You can also reject this tax return if from some reason you believe that it is incorrect, and in such case you should submit odrzuć button on the web page. And in such case, you should remember that your annual tax return was not submitted, and you are still obliged to make the reconciliation on your own. You can also undertake no action, and in such case, after the statutory deadline, end of April, your annual tax return will be considered as submitted. So the next step will be downloading the certificate UPO, which confirms that your tax return was submitted, and you can do it according to the instructions which are on the previous slides.
That was all in terms of our first goal of today's meeting. We wanted to go together with you with the tax form, with the way how you need to reconcile your employment income coming from city, but also some other income. We have been seeing the discussion and the questions on the chat. Some of them are already answered. The remaining will be answered pretty soon. We are working on them. Piotr is actually working on them. In terms of the questions that you've got, we are almost close to the end. So if you've got some, if there are some doubts regarding the outcome of today's training, we are here to help. So please feel to raise them. If not, and if you still have got a moment, we would like to go with you with some technical aspects, some details regarding the principles of the Polish taxation. I promise to make it in a smart and simple way. Important thing, on the slides you will find the relevant information. They will be with you. You may review them, and hopefully they will be self-explanatory. That was our goal, that these slides will remain with you to help you to understand various issues connected with Polish tax reconciliation and tax matters. Here, the common sources of the income, as you may see, employment income, but as also the income coming from real estate property, income from capital gains, sale of shares income, dividends, interest that you may earn, rental income. These are the most popular sources of income you may earn, and how this is taxed. First thing, employment income. If we're talking about the employment income, here you see the list of the sources and elements of the employment income, which all together are making your revenues coming from your employment contract with City in Poland. So not only the gross salary stipulated in your assignment contract, but also some other employment income and elements and components of your remuneration. They all together are making your revenues coming from employment income, which are visible on these PIT 11 forms that we have discussed earlier today. And employment income in Poland is taxed with 32% tax rate. As we have discussed, this is the marginal tax rate. On the chart, there were questions regarding potential extra payments coming from preparation of the annual tax return. There were the amounts put of 2,000 Polish zlotys approximately. Potentially, the reasons why you needed to pay the additional money of tax compared to the previous year was that the income was taxed at the level of the tax advances at 18%, and now in the annual tax return, part of the income is falling at 32%, or there is the issue of tax-free amount that might have been applied during the year, and right now you are potentially suffering from its lack or the right to use only the limited amount of it. The second source of income, this is real estate property income. As we have discussed, this income is subject to separate declaration and reporting on PIT 39 form. You may see here the details of taxation. You may see the important information if you sell the real estate property during the 5 years period as of the moment you have acquired it. You will need to pay the tax. The tax is calculated at 19%. Details are here when you are allowed to be exempted from this, but still you need to remember about this. If you buy and sell real estate properties, you may need to pay the taxes, again assuming that your revenues will be higher than the costs borne by you. Another source of income, this is our capital gains, transfer of shares. Again, if you are positive, so your revenues are higher than the cost incurred by you, and the income taxable in Poland, and generally this is subject to 19% taxation. So simple things, I bought 100 shares worth 1,000 Polish zloty. This was my cost. In a couple of months I sold them. My revenue was 3,000 Polish zloty. 2,000 is a taxable basis for myself. I multiplied by 19%, and the outcome of that shall be put on PIT 38 form and reconciled for Polish tax purposes again by the end of April of the year following the year in which the revenue was earned. In the case when you are suffering losses, it's easy these days. Then please remember that you also should file the form to show the revenues, to show the cost, to present the loss to the tax authorities, to be able to utilize it in the future. Another important information, dividends and interest income. Important remark, dividends and interest income earned on the territory of Poland, coming from Polish bank, coming from Polish companies, are taxed at source at 19% usually. What means that you receive the net proceeds of your interest and dividends and nothing to be reported or taxed separately under the Polish annual tax return. The situation is different when we are talking about the interest and dividends earned outside of Poland. Then the obligation to reconcile such interest and dividends accrued abroad, it is your obligation. You need to pay 19% of tax in Poland on these sources of income. It's also important to draw your attention to the fact that in Poland there is no tax-free amount on such payments. So even though from your perspective the interest income earned on your Dutch, UK bank account are not significant and maybe of 20 GB pounds, still you are obliged to pay 19% of tax on these 20 GB pounds, regardless of the fact that the amount may seem for you not big, not significant. There is no tax-free amount in that respect. What we also got here, we've got also rental income. If you are possessing real estate property and you are renting it out, you receive the rental income, you need to pay the tax on that in Poland. You may either tax the income along with the progressive tax rates with 18, 32%, or you may choose this preferential lump sum taxation with no right to use the cost of earning revenues, but on the other hand, with the lower tax rate, generally of 8.5% for the last year. We've got here also the couple of comments on the standard deductions. There was the question on the chat regarding the zero cost of earning revenue presented on PIT 11 form by the employer. My personal advice is to go to your employer and ask why this was not included. But generally, if you are an active employee and during last year you have been earning employment income, you are allowed to pay to decrease the revenues by the monthly amount of cost of earning revenues. As per the slides here, it's 111.25 Polish zloty per month, altogether more than 1,000 of Polish zloty per year. The same with the certain possibilities to use 50% cost of earning revenues in the case when you as the employee are benefiting from the costs of respective for the authors transposing their property rights to your employer. Here is the limit which you also need to take into account while calculating the taxes. Another personal deductions. These are the deductions that you may use. There was a question on the chat. I made kind of the investments question whether I will be able to make a kind of a relief on that. In Poland, the number of the reliefs is pretty limited, and you may find here the most popular. They are connected with donations made for charity purposes. There is also a chance to decrease the taxable basis by the rehabilitation relief if you've got injured person, and you may claim and prove justify certain expenditures in that respect. We've got also a right to decrease the social security to decrease the taxable basis by the social security contributions. You might have seen on the slides when we were talking about PIT 11 form completion and putting the proper figures to the proper boxes on the tax form. Another deductions that we've got, the one of the most important for Poland, it's child relief. You can see here the conditions. Important thing, for each child you are allowed to decrease your tax due by more than 1,000 Polish zloty. If the number of children is significant, the amounts are actually doubled. So you may use this relief. Just remember that if you've got only one child, you are allowed to use this deduction only if your salary, your revenues are limited. If you've got at least 2 children, regardless of the volume of your remuneration, you may easily put this deduction in your Polish tax form. Important thing, you need to remember about the attachment to your PIT form, where you put the names of your children, or if they've got Polish PESEL numbers, it's enough that you put the PESEL number of your children and just mark properly that you are bringing them for the whole year, part of the year, depending on the circumstances of yours. What we've got also, if you are a non-resident, we have been discussing it at the very beginning, spent less than 1 day, 3 days, no center of personal and economic interest on the territory of Poland. Again, certain deductions and certain privileges can be used. Here are the details. I would not go through them, but you may find some more information on the slide here. And again, if you pay the tax abroad, you may, under certain conditions, decrease the tax due in Poland by the tax paid abroad. This is called foreign tax relief. Again, to be used by you if you are having the income taxable in Poland that was previously subject to tax in the country where you generated your income, where your income was actually crystallizing. Very last topic, Social Security contributions. Majority of you is paying the Polish Social Security contributions as employees of the Polish city entity. This is the way how the Social Security contributions are calculated. I will now not go through the details, but you may learn how these contributions are calculated and how they come to the amounts that are stipulated on your PIT 11 forms. You may also see how much is paid by you, how much is paid by your employer. And actually, we are almost at the end. The very last thing, the tax process, the way how what's going on with your taxes, the way how the tax process looks like. You file your tax form to the tax authorities, and if everything goes smoothly, you either pay the tax, you receive the refund. If there are the issues, it may happen that tax proceedings are started towards your case. Then there is a process, the decision is issued, and you may make an appeal towards that. And this is how it can go to the courts and to various instances. I do not wish you to be in a position to go through such tax audit process, but if for some reasons you've got certain sources of income which are not declared, or the tax authorities are seeing something improper, such, I would say, most significant issues may lead to such tax audit. In, I would say, kind of standard situation where you make kind of a common mistake, or you will fail to sign your tax form, then the tax authorities will simply call you, write an email to you, send a letter to you to ask you to correct, improve. If there are the issues that they've got a suspicion that something is not declared properly, some sources of income are hidden for some purposes or were simply not declared for a reason, then this serious tax audit process may be initiated towards your case. This was actually all what we had to present to you, what was our goal to present to you. As said at the very beginning, we had no ambition that you will become the tax advisors, tax consultants right now. Our ambition was to help you to understand what you need to do, what you need to remember. So filing a PIT by the end of April, including sources of your income. If you've got 2 PIT 11 forms from 2 employers, just add the amounts, sum them up, and use them properly in your tax forms. Please remember about paying the tax by the end of April. Please remember about sending the proper information to the tax authorities if you are expecting a refund. Please also remember that you've got the right to child relief. It's your money, and you may easily claim this money back if you meet the respective conditions. These are the most popular things. And the kind of administrative things, after this training, we'll send you the presentations, we'll send you the calculator that will be helpful, the list of tax reliefs that may be used by you. And from our side, it was all. And we really thank you that you were with us. We thank you for the questions on the chat. And we hope that you will manage to go through your tax obligations smoothly and without any issues. Thank you.
Thank you.